Everyone, my name is Adriana Fontaine and I work for the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. I am a bilingual parent consultant, and I also am the manager for the early childhood support programs that we have. We provide support to families who have children with developmental delays and disabilities in several ways via technical assistance, full consultation. We have trainings like this one, and we can also attend in certain circumstances to PPT meetings with the school district. Tonight's workshop is all about social communication and what does it mean for young children with autism. We're going to have an emphasis on joint attention and turn taking in young children. And our presenter for tonight is Dr. Lee. He is the Assistant Professor of Early Childhood Special Education at Eastern Connecticut State University. So a few housekeeping items. Please keep yourself in mute. Feel free to use the reaction buttons or raise your hand or utilize the chat to give us any comments, any questions. Feel free to share if you have a child with autism, where you're joining from. So whenever you're ready, Dr. Lee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fontaine. And it's very nice to meet you all today. Good evening. So thank you for joining today's workshop. So my name is Kwangwon Lee, but I go by Won Lee. So I'm an assistant professor at the Center for Early Childhood Education at Eastern Connecticut State University. I teach mainly special education courses and supervise early childhood teacher candidates for the certification program here at Eastern. So, so here is our agenda for today on what I'd like to share with you. So hopefully many of you will actually think about the meaning of social communication and take away some new ideas and suggestions for your own child. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave a message in our chat box. I will actually pay attention to our chat box as we move through the slides. So today I'm going to, so briefly, we would like to introduce ourselves, who we are and what our research team does. And I will briefly talk about the basic information for autism, how autism is currently defined, and current prevalence of autism diagnosis in the US. Then our main topic I'm going to talk about is social communication. And under the social communication, what kind of forms of social communication we can see, and how can we promote social communication in young children. Then I will also briefly talk about our current research, and then I would like to hear your some thoughts and voice through the discussion. Then also at the end of the slide, I also included my contact information. So if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to reach out. To me. Thank you. Oops. Okay. So. All right. I am. So as I just introduce a little bit myself. Before coming to Eastern 2019, I work on a research team at Indiana University for 5 years. 5 years where I studied the effects of an early intervention program for toddlers with autism. So during that time, I developed my doctoral research in exploring the association between a simple back and forth exchanges with more complicated interactions that I was able to observe in young children with autism engaging with their caregivers. Then also currently, our research team members are working very hard to investigate on intervention to see the efficacy of social communication competencies through simple back and forth exchange activities for young children with autism. So we have one intervention counselor, Miss Anderson, and also we have two research assistants who are diligently actually working to communicate with and reach out to agencies in Connecticut. So if you don't mind, our research teams, could we actually introduce ourselves a little bit? All right. Ms. Anderson, if you don't mind, could you introduce yourself a little bit? Then
Sure. My name is Ashley Anderson. I've worked in the field of early childhood for 11 years, primarily as a preschool teacher, but more recently, the last 3.5 years, I worked with the Center for Early Childhood Education at Eastern on a project that we developed multiple online interactive learning modules to be utilized for home visitation programs across the state, which was a fantastic project. I learned a lot in terms of my professional development. And in the fall of 2020, as I work towards finishing up my double master's in elementary education and early childhood education, I was lucky enough to take Professor Lee's course on interventions for young children with autism. And it was during that class that he discussed the possibility of working on this current research alongside him. And so in this current research, I serve as the intervention counselor. My role is primarily to listen to the families and offer guidance if need be during our weekly meetings when they discuss with me how the intervention is going, any concerns, any success stories, and then we modify accordingly. If they need suggestions, I offer suggestions, but really, ideally, we brainstorm together to come up with activities that fit their personal family style.
then, Ms. Burden, if you don't mind, could you introduce yourself a little bit?
So I'm Abigail Borden. I'm a third-year student at Eastern. I'm majoring in early childhood education and psychology. And really, so far, what Fatima and I have been doing is reaching out to agencies and, like Juan said, but just making sure that we can contact as many people, and just really excited to be part of this.
Thank you. And Ms. Godina?
Hello, everyone. My name is Fatima Godina. I am a student here at Eastern. I work as a research assistant for the Center of Early Childhood Education at Eastern. My major is psychology, minoring in genetic counseling. And like Abby mentioned, we contact different providers and center directors to just spread more information about our study to see if they could help us in gaining participants.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. So actually, I would like to conduct a few brief polls, if you don't mind, so I can get to know you actually all a bit. So if you don't mind, could you actually participate in this poll, please?
And to Michelle and Sabrina, I have launched the poll, so feel free to let me know if you can see it, number one. Okay, I see some, yep, okay, all right. Okay, so excellent. So I'm gonna see if I can share the poll, but we have two parents in the room, one teacher. We have another professional. If you don't mind putting in the chat your role, that would be awesome. And as far as how did you find out about this workshop? Agency, two of you found out through your agency and through other means. So if you want to put it on the chat, that would be great. And these are the results,
Oh.
Dr. Lee.
Thank you. Also, we have two parents and one teacher and two others. So if you don't know, like where, like who you are a little bit, if you don't mind, in the chat box. Okay, I see. All right.
Sabrina says she found out through Eastern email. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Sabrina. All right, and agency and others. All right, thank you very much. All right, this is going to be very helpful for me as we go on, so I can actually facilitate more discussion as we actually as we actually discuss in the later slides. Thank you.
And Atul also found out through the email in Eastern. He just we just have the message in the chat both.
Okay. All right. Okay. So,
Grandmother caregiver, thank you, Conchetta, for sharing that.
so now briefly, I'd like to talk about the basic information for individuals with autism. So in the past, between actually 2016 and 2018, studies have found prevalence rates of autism ranging from 1 in 68 children to 1 in 59 children. But currently, the current estimated in 2010 estimated prevalence of autism is 1 in 54 children. So there are several actually factors to consider. So first of all, we understand autism actually better than we did in the past. And actually there are better screening and assessment tools available. So probably you heard about some of the instruments in in the past. So two instruments are together generally considered the gold standard for diagnosing autism, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule, which is ADOS, second version, and the Autism Diagnostic Interview. So the diagnosis of autism is often made by actually by a psychiatrist criteria established by the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder called DSM-5. So DSM-5 considers autism symptoms to fall under two general categories: social communication and restrictive repetitive behaviors. And sometimes practitioners and other experts, they just simply call RRBs. This is very important to knowledge, and this is because this is an important update from the previous version from DSM-4 revised, and it actually helps practitioners identify autism with more valid and reliable diagnostic tools. So for tonight, I would like to actually focus on one of the primary domains, social communication. So before I talk about social communication topic, actually, I'd like to actually encourage you to think about communication from your personal experience. As I give you two different scenarios. So for instance, sharing a photo with loved ones, or versus ordering food at a restaurant. So if you don't mind, I'm going to be quiet a little bit. So think about two scenarios that I gave you and consider what kind of a communication you did and what kind of a contents did you actually communicate with someone, okay? then if you don't mind, you can come up if you have some ideas. So please feel free to actually write in the message. So I would like to actually see it.
Dr. Lee, do you want to launch the next poll? I lost count of the
I'm sorry.
slide number.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, all right. Maybe we can actually wait a little bit after this.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good.
All right. I should be a bit slow. Yeah. Okay. Anyone? Or if does anyone want to speak up a little bit? So thinking about like, probably for instance, maybe during the holidays, probably extended family visited you. Of course, nowadays it's very difficult at this point, but I hope you remember like a couple of years ago. But remember like during the holidays, probably your extended family visited you, and actually you actually share like some of the events they actually had experienced. And so that kind of a conversation and communication, you actually bring some cares to your conversation. And because you are sharing something, because you care and because you love them. But but the other another but the other a scenario I gave you as a of ordering food at a restaurant, thinking about going to the restaurant, when you go to a restaurant, you order food, we and a waiter or waitress are waiting for you to actually uh, get the order, but that two different scenarios, you are communicating. However, the way how you communicate with are very different. So that's why I like to kind of make a point. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit further, as we go on. So communication, first of all, communication is not just about the language itself. When we actually we communicate with others in many different actually ways, such as with gestures, facial expressions, and your dispositions to exchange our information to others. Then we can think about the purpose of the information we are communicating. That is the most important part we need to consider. So not all communication is verbal, as I said, and not all communication is social. So this is very important to actually identify, because in early intervention for young children with autism, many researchers focus on social communication, because studies have found that individuals with autism have a difficulty communicating for social purpose. And also the studies have found that children with autism have a less difficulty with non-social communication. And so that's one of the reasons why many researchers actually pay attention to this social communication area. So there are many scholars that actually define the meaning of a social communication, but I like actually Dr. Tomasello and Carpenter. So social communication actually requires an awareness of and appreciation for a communication partner's perspective and the ability to share attention with the partner in relation to a common interest. So before we move on to next one, I would like to actually ask you next polls. So if you don't mind, could you participate in the poll, please?
And Dr. Lee, we have a comment from Conchetta. She says that communication with her grandson is difficult. There's very little eye contact, and they're working on this as a team. With the team, I'm assuming either early intervention or the school team.
Yes, I'm going to talk about eye contact, more specifically, and throughout and also after this slide, I would like to share with you actually some of the examples, then we can actually talk about more about eye contact and other like other nonverbal communication forms. Thank you.
Definitely. And if you're able to see the poll, okay, I'm seeing some responses coming in. Thank you so much.
Okay. What do you consider? Okay. Do you have? Okay. Yes. And what do you consider the most important area?
Oh, okay. He's 2 hours. He is 2 hours, 2 years, 3 months. Conchetta, is that okay? That's his age. Okay. So he's just probably finishing early intervention pretty soon.
Communication.
Communication.
Yes. Then we
Okay, and I'm gonna share the results.
Oh, wow. That's quick. Thank you. All right. Thank you for sharing. What do you consider the most important area of your child's development? Language and language, speech, behavior, and social relationship, and others. I'm actually glad to actually see these results because in the past, not a lot of actually practitioners and parents are not aware of a social and relationship, as a core, like, development domains. So I'm glad to actually see that. And language and speech, yes, I'm going to talk about this one a little bit later, like after I show some video data. All right, thank you very much. So we need to we need to consider the purpose of a communication we use. So social communication actually help us build social relationship, such as with the partners, parents, peers, and teachers, and support later development in language and cognition. So that's one of the key points why social communication is very important. And probably many of you are not really clear. Oh, yeah, communication and social communication. Probably you are a bit confused, So that's why I prepared some example videos, and please take a look at those examples, like, as we actually then trying to look at their engagements a bit later. All right. So maybe actually one participant said eye contact. Yes, eye contact is one of the nonverbal communication forms. So usually it shows people language use. So eye gaze or eye contact is very important and as one of the nonverbal communication forms. And pointing, thinking about pointing, always we are actually using sometimes, a lot of young kids, they use like a pointing, but also they are using like a turn taking as well, like a back and forth exchanges between a child and caregiver. And also we young kids, especially around the 9 or 10 months, typical developing kids, they show this joint attention competencies. All right, so nonverbal communication forms. So we noticed this one, many young children with autism are experiencing very difficulty. Eye contact, pointing, tongue taking. But not just about, as I said, not just about the nonverbal communication forms we need to consider. We need to think about child's intent. Why child use such this kind of nonverbal communication forms? Why? Like probably, for instance, pointings. Probably, yes. Probably a child wants to share with you. So for instance, like I'm thinking about one example is a child is looking at the window and there is a fire truck passing by the passing through the house, and child is like looking at the fire truck and show and tell mom, mom, look at that. There's a fire truck going through, and that is because he's pointing, because he wants to share with you. He wants to share what he's experiencing, what he's seeing and hearing and experiencing. But another example of pointing can be not social, not very much social. So for instance, maybe a child wants to reach out to his or her favorite toy. So child actually is pointing to the toy he wants to actually obtain. So then the mom is looking at like a child's pointing and get the toy for the child. But that pointing form is not actually social clearly, because he's not sharing with you. He's simply trying to requesting you to obtain the object. So that is a very different like a communication actually functions we can actually consider. Do we have any questions about these examples? I would like to, I try to share some examples as I explain.
Dr. Lee, I think the example that you gave with pointing is something that I see a lot with the moms that I work with. Their main concerns stem from the lack of having the verbal ability to get the message across. And we know that communication is like sending a message. And so my question would be if there's any relationship between the lack of communication and intent, like the child is not communicating with intent, or is intentional communication social communication?
So yes, so the child's intent can be like a non-social, but also the child's intent can be social. So it's very difficult to distinguish it, what kind of child's intent he or she was driven by. So that is the case. So that's the case we want to actually identify very clearly. So for instance, in this turn taking, back and forth exchange between a child and caregiver can be social, but also it cannot be social either. It's called the instrumental turn taking, otherwise known as non-social turn taking, can be requesting or following direction, task-oriented back and forth exchanges. So for instance, mom asked a child, it's your turn, it's time to stack, it's your turn and my turn. We don't, throughout the video data, we don't see child's volition. We really try to look at child's willingness to show child's a free will, in that interaction. It's very important to consider. But on the other hand, social turn taking, back and forth exchange, so we are able to see sharing interest with another person. So I would like to actually share with the two videos. I'm going to be very quiet, then please watch first video and second video carefully. Then I would like to actually facilitate some discussion after that. Okay. Okay. Do you see? Okay. then they are able to show more complex communication form, which is called joint attention. So I have to go back. Okay. I went too far. So joint attention actually visually coordinates attention between a communication partner and an object or event for the purpose of sharing information or interest about the object or event. So joint attention, we can observe in two different actual ways. When child respond to caregiver's action, that's called the responding to joint attention. And when child actually initiate something to share for their caregiver, that is called initiating joint attention. This is very important for us and for practitioners because this is research found that joint attention actually is a precursor to their later language development. So that is a very, studies already have found that joint attention is a very important milestone as they develop in the beginning of their social communication competencies. So joint attention help us, in short, joint attention help us to share our interest in something or something with another person. So I'm going to share with you what joint attention looks like in next video. All right, so I just, so these actually kids, those children were part of like a larger intervention studies, then I actually, that was my kind of one of the main like a study I was participating in the research at Indiana University. So those old children were actually, they are all children, all children were diagnosed with autism, and we try to see whether or not they showed, improve, their social communication competencies later on throughout the intervention process. All right. So, any thoughts about joint attention? What did you actually think about, joint attention? What did you actually notice that? Does anyone would like to speak up or share in the chat?
Well, everyone gather their thoughts. One thing that I did notice and that I feel that joint attention can it be categorized as a behavior? And I have a question. So joint attention, does it affect symbolic play? Like we know that kids who are in the spectrum struggle sometimes with symbolic play. Is there a relationship between joint attention and symbolic play?
Yes. How I remember there was a study about the relationship between symbolic play and joint attentions. Yes, and they are highly correlated, positively correlated with the two actually with those variables, and so researchers studies have found that as far as the children shows more joint attention, they are more likely to actually play show pretend and or symbolic plays. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Does anyone have any comments regarding the videos? Any personal experiences that you have observed with your child in terms of joint attention?
I think Concera is trying to say something, but she's having a tough time unmuting. Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Okay, I unmuted myself. I was like, how do I unmute myself? I just wanted to ask, because with our grandson, we have he is doing the thing one of the boys was doing in the video where he'll chase one of us and turn around and look at us and run after us, you know. Like I said before, that's the beginning of what he's doing, starting. But his verbal skills are, he doesn't have the verbal skills. So what I wanted to ask was, you're saying that you're seeing kids who with autism who have this
Joint attention,
like you see that over time that the verbal skills come into play, because it seems like the kids that we just watched had verbal skills.
Yes. Oh yeah. Probably you didn't. Oh yes. One of the last boy, actually he was non-verbal when he actually came to in the beginning of the intervention, and then as we analyzed his like a progress, we noticed that his like a verbal skill was more frequent than before, as we actually observe more like a joint frequency of joint attention as they actually show better. So yes, I can tell you joint attention. So studies actually in the past, like 20 years ago, a lot of researchers hypothesized that joint attention could be the precursor to their later language development. But then recently, recent studies have found that joint attention actually is a precursor to their later language development. Not just about language development, but also social components, social aspect of communication has been improved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. So you saw this one, and probably many of like in my when I was a practitioner, probably a lot of parents and teachers asked me about, so how do we do this? Like how do we actually support our children? You know, like so here's what my past studies we actually implemented. So I'm going to actually talk about general like points, and then after this, I'm going to actually give you more specific principles. So how can we actually promote social communications? So division. Of early childhood of the Council for Exceptional Children recommends developmentally appropriate practices when working with young children. So these practices emphasize the importance of nurturing other-child relationship, providing support in natural settings. So I'm going to actually give you more these kind of general like ideas. Then I'm going to actually explain a bit further about what that means. So for instance, as you can see, follow your child's leads. So when your child is interested in something, they are more interested in learning. So that's what we can actually we can find in our practices. You follow your child's lead and use their interest, such as favorite toys or activities, while you play with them and encourage their play. And play, young kids, they love play. So who doesn't love to play, by the way? I love to play, so play has, but in the study, play has several benefits to children's development, such as in social, emotional, cognitive, and physical domains. And especially social communication can be best supported through play activities with your child. And another practice the EC actually recommends is the natural settings and routines. So many early childhood organizations suggest that conducting intervention in early environments that are natural to the child and during regular routines. But a lot of parents, sometimes some practitioners, they don't really, they only like restrict, they only consider their homes, but this doesn't always have to be the home, thinking about that. How much, like for instance, how often do you go to grocery shoppings? How often, do you go to park? How often do you go to and other their friends' houses, So as far as children's where they children's are involved in that can be our natural settings, but also what kind of routines, what kind of regular routines the child is actually following through in their daily lives. So that's very important to consider. And even though even thinking about in your car in the during the car driving, driving somewhere in the car, that can be all like a natural settings. And so I don't want you to limit yourself to thinking about just only home settings, so it can be anywhere children are exposed to in where they used to. And child's intent, as I kept saying in the beginning of this workshop, more importantly, we encourage you actually to understand why your child is communicating. So what's behind the act, just the communication, for what's behind the purpose the child actually is trying to tell you. So trying to understand child's intent, that's really important. Probably a lot of times we are, a lot of times we simply look at their behavior, what they can do, but if we understand child's intent, it really helps us and help your child to understand. So, all right. So I gather I gather four important components to keep in mind for families. So under these four important components, so I would like to actually go a bit further about how in the next slide. But before we get into it, Ms. Fontaine, may I ask them how many hours, next polls, please?
Certainly. Okay, I just launched the poll, so let's take a few seconds to answer the questions, and then I'll share the results. Are you able to see it? Oh, yes, okay. They're coming in.
Pointing, yes.
Okay, Atul, you found the second question. Okay, so how many, all right. Dr. Lee, so the question that you shared with me was how many intervention services do you and your child currently receive? Are you specifically asking, like, do they receive speech and language? Do they receive?
Yeah, any other yeah, like to actually see.
Okay.
How many intervention services do you and your child currently receive? 1, 2, okay, 4 or more. Oh, we have, yes, I think that's common. All right, thank you. Because, okay, and have you observed your child using any of the forms of nonverbal communication? Smiling, pointing, okay, eye contact, back and forth exchange, verbal or nonverbal, and looking at something such as object. Okay, so that's a really good, important, like you on, so, oh, smiling, okay, that's good. Even like a smiling, we have to kind of understand like a smile, why the child actually smile at you, you know, like we have to understand because I've seen through in my practice and my research, I see childs are smiling because they like to get stimulated. They are stimulated like up and down. Mom, you know, mom loves to like mom is like picking him up and down. So child got really stimulated and he was like smiling, you know, but that smiling is actually socially smiling at you. So that's something I want you to think about. And eye contact, yeah, as I just view the example, is that eye contact really sharing something you the child is wanting to share with you, or is he or is she asking you something to do? So that's why the child actually gave you the eye contact, you know. Right. Oh, but I think I'm very good actually see like a many different type of actual number of communication forms that we can see in this actually uh, participants. I'm glad to see. All right. Also, how many intervention services do you and your child corner receive? So one intervention, and two and four or more. So maybe I didn't ask this question, but what kind of interventions do you usually receive? If you don't mind, could you type in?
And Atul just noted, I noticed the chat, and
Mhm.
basically the child is receiving one related service from school district. So
Mhm.
in the school district, they have specialized instruction, and they also have related services such as speech,
Appreciate.
occupational therapy, physical therapy, and in some cases they have a BCBA and ABA services depending on the needs of the child.
Mhm. He received one from school district. So, oh yeah. So, but did I was thinking about, do you actually receive it, you know, like independent interventions out of like your school district? So that was my kind of main questions because in and like, you know, not the school, but more like, you know, through the agencies, you know. So that's what I was kind of wondering, because in my studies, medical model in the community, in Indiana, in the past, like, you know, current like participants that they receive more than like two or three independent like interventions, and some of the interventions were implemented at home. So that's what I'm just curious, like how you received it. Speech, occupational therapy, music at school, but nothing as often like outside school district. All right, thank you very much, because that really helped me understand what's going on here in Connecticut. So thank you. All right, so probably you receive several like intervention, at least one or more, but how can you actually help your kids, you know, in your life, you know. So under this, so I hope this each principles helps you engage with your child. So these principles are called the mediated learning principles. The original principles actually were developed by Dr. Nina Klein for early intervention. Then Dr. Hannah Schwartz actually modified the principles for young children with autism. So there are key features of this principle. So first, they strengthen parent and child relationship and enhance the family's capacities to promote their child's development. Second, the mediated principle, the mediated learning principles are provided in natural environments and integrate throughout typical everyday experiences. And third, they promote an active child role in learning. And finally, they help children build their social communication development. So as you can see, there are like 5 principles: focusing, organizing and planning, giving meaning, encouraging, and expanding. So let me give you each like principles a bit further. So focusing. So in focusing principle, you help your child pay attention to the current activities. So which means you kind of trying to, in other words, you let your child be in, you ask their activity be in their play. So you actually ask, you are going to actually pay attention to their current activity, what they are playing. So for instance, there are a lot of some kids that they love to play with a train, like a train, and they love to line up the train, especially for young children with autism. And just don't just watch like what they are doing. Probably you can actually try to actually do parallel play. So you actually uh, imitate what they are playing, and you actually in that motion you ask your child to be in that play together. So that is the focusing and organizing and planning. So you actually, this principle, it helps, you can create a structure that supports the activity. So what it means is like you can organize the activity. So for instance, you don't, probably you don't want to like leave your TVs on. It can be very distracting to you and your child. So you can actually minimize all the distractions, in your home when actually the play is actually activity is going on, and thinking about your child, your family routines, when when does when do you have like a breakfast, when do you have like a lunch, or like when do you have like a bath time, you kind of organize some of the like a fun activity, then you can embed it in their like daily routines, so you kind of try to build some like a planning the activity into your like daily lives. And giving meaning, this is very, very important actually, because it helps your child to make meaning of the current activity and the importance of the interaction. So for instance, uh, I think it happens to many teachers too. Instead of a good job, like saying just tell them good job, maybe the young kids, they don't know what it means. You have to kind of give some meaning, like, wow, what did you do? Like you show some interest, and you actually show more facial expression or gestures to tell your child, you are actually communicating, with the child, and you are actually in the activity, you are actually in the moment. So giving like a meaning, like what the child attempts to do, then encouraging. Next principle is called the encouraging. It actually motivates your child in their ability to engage in the like activities, which means you actually are going to find their similar like activities. Then actually that activity motivates the child, something the child is interested in. Probably some kids, they love to play with like a bubble, or some kids, they love to actually uh, uh, sing, like they love to listen to the rhyming sing, like so you can actually build into some of the different like activities to actually encourage more their motivations. And expanding, So it helps your child maintain and use the activities in different settings and situation and with the different people. So as I just talked earlier, like a probably natural setting, maybe you probably want to do this some activities at home, but also you can apply to different like a different like a environments like a shopping, like grocery store. So maybe you can put your child in the shopping cart, and you can actually play. You can actually sing a song like a back and forth, like wheels goes around them, round, and you pause and round. You give some of the different settings, or even like you can do in your car. You sing like some kind of rhyming singing. So you kind of build those kind of different like environments and different situations. And also not just about you, probably maybe they can play very similar activities with their grandparents or aunt and uncle. So children get more familiar, and they are able to generalize those interaction in more like in many different situations. So that's what I like to kind of share with you, especially these principles. And because once parents, once you understand these principles, I really hope you can actually apply these principles into different activities. That's something I like to kind of share with you for this workshop. So lastly, so this is what I'm doing at this point. So current research, in current research, I am actually investigating, like social, investigating the social turn-taking intervention. So social turn-taking is a completely virtual early intervention program designed to support children with autism in learning socially based back and forth exchanges. So I would like to make sure like we are investigating the efficacy of one intervention to support children's use of turn taking for social purposes. So I just gave you that principle. So I am trying to actually adapt that principle to this particular turn taking activities. So I would like to see whether or not they actually show better social communication. So actually these principles were used in a large scale study in Indiana, North Carolina, and Kansas. And they just, I think this study has been published in 2018, and I actually published my own study in 2020 officially. So if you are curious, you are more than welcome to look into those studies as well. So if you are interested in the intervention study, yeah, I give you this link here. So please, you can just simply go and sign up. So, and if you have any questions about the interventions, we are actually happy to actually explain further about that.
Dr. Lee, do you happen to have the link that we can put it in the chat for them, because it is in the PowerPoint and it's not, you cannot click it or copy it, but if you happen to have it, maybe that would be helpful.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I feel that just trying to think about the things that I did with my kid when he was little, trying to promote the joint attention and the social communication. I remember making a list of the things that he liked to do. And like you said, I would follow his lead. I remember if I showed him a colored book of animals and he would say doggy, I would emphasize and say big doggy or brown doggy or things like that, just to get his attention.
But sometimes, parents, yes, I think sometimes I've seen, through my experience, sometimes parents, they change the true meaning of a play into lesson, like let's say, like to more academic play, like for someone said, like I'm kind of hesitant to do that because then child lose their interest right after that, So I want to emphasize more like, oh, if a child is interested in this something, then yeah, just play along with them, be in the moment. You don't have to teach at the moment,
Yeah.
So that, so, I think a lot of children, they are very sensitive. Like, oh, this is something I don't feel comfortable, then they just walk away. I've seen so many times, they just walk away. They just,
They know when
So
they're done.
yeah.
Yes.
So yes, also I for this discussion, I actually finally I would like to kind of like to hear about your experience a little bit. And I came to Eastern 2 years ago from Indiana, so I'd like to know more about what's going on here in Connecticut. And I'd like to kind of ask you, or the meaning of social communication. So what does the social communication mean to you? And any questions or experience that you want to share, please. Now, I hope we hope to hear more about your voice. And I think especially, I really like this my study because this study especially, I know I believe our parents know their child the best. Every individual's kids, they have a very different personalities. They have a very different uh, mm, routines and even like a favorite like a toys. Sometimes we actually might experience sometimes some activity, yeah, it works just fine for one particular child, but sometimes that activity didn't really work for the other kids. I remember especially some kids, they love to play Lego, like a Lego blocks. They love to sit on the carpet and they just block, pay attention to the Lego. But some kids, they didn't, they love popping the a bubble, so parents, they utilized they actually came up with their own ideas, and I see then they apply those principles to the activities. So I think I want to make sure oh, it doesn't just give the what to do exactly for their parents, that's not, I don't, that's what something I don't really truly believe. I want to make sure our parents know, based on their wisdoms and knowledge. I think we can just we can provide guidelines and they make the decisions, and they can apply these principles to their own ideas. So I want to make sure I can empower all parents, So yes, that's it for me. I'm sorry, I'm going to be quiet. So any other questions or something to share?
We have a message from Catherine. She says, thank you. My gratitude to Dr. Lee for this meaningful information. So definitely very, very informational. And it's definitely something that we see in our daily work with parents who have young ones with autism, is they're constantly striving to find meaning as to how they can improve their language skills, not just spoken language, but the ability to engage their child meaningfully in relationships. Their ability to notice other people's behaviors and feelings, to convey emotions, to notice gestures. So definitely this discussion was wonderful, Dr. Lee. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Oh yeah, so please feel free to contact me if you would like to actually, if you have any further questions, and especially I'd like to actually meet more everyone, in the future. So.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. And I have the last poll for everyone. if you can take a few seconds to respond. It's only 3 questions. Atul says it was very informative, Dr. Lee, so thank you very much for that. And again, I want to let everyone know that the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center has programs and can provide information regarding disability, regarding your rights in special education and early intervention. So we encourage you to call CPAC if you have any questions. Vanessa, do you mind putting our number? Thank you. Thanks, Vanessa. All right. Okay, I think everybody participated in the poll, so I'm just going to close it. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.